Hello, and thank you for joining me today as we talk about large group literacy in the Georgia's pre-K classroom. My name is Nikki Underwood. I am a quality support specialist with Georgia's pre-K. And again, I want to thank you for joining me today. In today's session, we will talk about what is large group literacy, and we will look at some of the pre-K requirements for large group literacy lessons. We will talk about some of the varied activities that can be used to plan large group literacy, and I will also provide you with some resources at the end of the session. So let's begin by talking about what is large group literacy. The IQ Guide for Planning Instruction states that large group literacy activities are planned daily. The activities incorporate both reading and writing skills over the course of the week. So let's take this statement and unpack it so we can understand what the IQ Guide is telling us about large group literacy time. So the first thing it says is that large group literacy activities are planned daily. So what does that mean? It means that large group literacy must be included on the weekly lesson plan template. It usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes to get a high quality, developmentally appropriate large group literacy activity finished. And so you want to plan out about 15 minutes of your day to do that every day. And you must include an activity on the template every week, every day of every week. You must also think about providing sufficient information to clearly reflect the purpose of the activity, as well as what the teacher needs to do during the activity, and what the students will do during the activity. So include in your plans a description of each day's reading or writing activity. You can include the title of a book, poem, or nursery rhyme. You could include what the writing topic for the shared writing experience will be. You could also include a description of the activity. But make sure that large group literacy activities have a clear plan and purpose every day of the week. Large group literacy is a time for shared reading and writing experiences. This is a time for teachers to engage children in conversations and ask questions. This is a time for helping students develop an awareness of the concepts of print, as well as increasing students' vocabulary, helping them to brainstorm and doing analysis and prediction activities. And of course, this is also a wonderful time to help children build skills necessary for reading comprehension and writing in future grades when they will engage in Readers and Writers Workshop. However, large group literacy is not a time for individual writing experiences. 4-year-old children are not quite ready for individual writing prompts. That might be more appropriate in a small group or during center time when you're one-on-one. But large group literacy is not a time for children to practice pencil grasp. It is not a time for children to practice letter formation. It is not a time for children to practice writing independently. And it's not a time for phonological awareness activities. We have another time of the pre-K day that is set aside specifically for phonological awareness activities. So you want to focus on reading and writing experiences during large group literacy. All of these activities, all of these skills are important skills for children to master and have time to practice, but they could be done at a different time of the day and reserve large group literacy for those shared reading and writing experiences. So let's look at our IQ Guide for Planning Instruction. Again, the statement says large group literacy activities are planned daily. We've already talked about that. So let's unpack the rest of that statement. It says the activities incorporate both reading and writing skills over the course of the week. So that means that teachers will need to plan a combination of reading and writing experiences throughout the course of every week. So large group literacy lessons should focus on the skills involved in the process of reading, in the reading comprehension skills. So as teachers are doing shared reading and group reading experiences, they want the children to be interacting with the text. We want the teachers to be thinking aloud and modeling what do good readers do before, during, and after reading. Before they read, we might preview and make predictions, and during the reading of a story or a text, we might stop frequently and ask questions or talk about vocabulary words. And what do you do after you read a story? How do you respond to that story? Again, we want to focus on the skills involved in reading comprehension. We also want to think about the skills involved in the process of writing. How do you write a story? How do you brainstorm to write a story? How do you make a plan for your story? How do you help children understand the connection between the spoken word and the written word? Large group literacy activities should always include shared writing, shared reading, or response to literature. We want children to understand why we read and why we write, the purposes of reading and writing. And we also want children to have an opportunity to respond to literature that they are familiar with or that they have recently read. So large group literacy in pre-K is going to be very similar to the mini lesson of a readers or writers workshop in an upper grade classroom. So thinking about that, when children get to the primary grades and the upper elementary grades, they do a daily readers or writers workshop. And so pre-K large group literacy is getting them ready for that. One activity you can choose to do during large group literacy is shared reading. Shared reading is an interactive reading experience with familiar books and texts. So when you do shared reading, you want to generally stick to familiar big books, especially books that are rhyming, repetitive, or predictable, because this will allow children to participate in the story with you by choral reading or call and response reading. So here's one way that you could do a shared reading over the course of 5 days using the same book. And so you would be doing multiple reads of the same book, and you would definitely want to include in your lesson plans what you will be doing with the book each day. If you're going to have the same title of the book in multiple days of the week, you need to clearly state the purpose for each time that you're going to read. So for example, on Monday or day one, you might preview the book. It might be a big book. It could be a nursery rhyme or a poem, but the first day you're going to preview and look at the story, look at the pages, look at the pictures, make predictions, and then read with enthusiasm. And that might be all you do for that day, is just to read the story and then ask the children a few questions after you've read. On day two, you would reread the story, and then this time you would want to use a pointer to demonstrate concepts of print, how you read top to bottom, left to right, and use that pointer to track as you read. On day three, you might reread using the close method, where especially if you're using a big book with simple text, you could go through the book ahead of time and cover up some of the familiar words with a sticky note or a piece of painter's tape. And then as you're reading, you could have children fill in the blank using that close method. On day four, you might reread the story again, and then this time you're going to respond to the story by dramatizing with puppets or props or using flannel board story pieces to help the children retell the story, the beginning, the middle, of the end, maybe talk about who the characters are and focus on the setting and where the story took place. And then on day five, for the final reading, you might discuss the story using the noticing technique, where you would encourage the children to notice things about different pages in the book, notice what was happening, notice how the characters are feeling, maybe you notice that there's a problem. So what can you notice in the story using the noticing technique? Now, these are just suggestions. You could mix these up. You could do 3 days of a book instead of 5. You could include different activities in a different order, but this is just a suggestion for how you could take the same book and do multiple purposes with it over the course of the week. Now, if you do shared reading 5 days a week, you are going to miss the opportunity to do shared writing. So again, this is just a suggestion. You could also include some of these reads, some of the readings of this story in your story time, and then do some of the activities as follow-up during large group literacy. So again, these are all just suggestions. So let's look at shared writing, because it is important to include at least one writing opportunity every week, because you need a combination. And shared writing is an opportunity where teachers do some modeled writing, which connects the spoken and the written word, and the teachers and students are working together to write a story or a letter to the principal. So let's jump in and look at shared writing. Remember that when you're doing shared writing, it should focus on the process and the purpose of writing, not the mechanics of writing. So what that means is we should be talking about things like characters in a possible story we might be writing, or that we use a capital letter at the beginning of a sentence and a period at the end. But we're not going to focus on pencil grasp and individual children writing individual letters. The idea here is for the writing process to be shared by the teacher and the children together. So in pre-K, children can begin working on the various stages of the writing process. If you're familiar with the writing process, you know that it starts with the pre-writing stage where you brainstorm and organize, and then you go create your rough draft, you do some revising and editing before you publish. And children in primary and upper grades do this during writer's workshop. Pre-K children are not quite ready to do that independently, but they can do that through the process of shared writing, especially the first few stages. So pre-writing and drafting, these can happen on a regular basis in the pre-K classroom. So the pre-writing stage is when you brainstorm and plan what you're going to write about. So a really solid way to get children thinking about how to write is to choose a shared experience, whether it was a field trip, a special speaker to the classroom, a special event that you had, making yesterday's snack, or maybe a story that you read that everyone really liked. So you choose a shared experience and then ask lots of questions to help the children brainstorm. And you could even chart the students' ideas as they share. Once you've talked about the ideas that they have, then you can move on to planning and organizing those ideas and putting them into a story format. So on the drafting stage, you would really want to help students along with putting their ideas into words. You could maybe look at the chart of ideas you came up with, and maybe you just want to have some new conversations. But whatever you're going to do, make sure that you're doing a lot of self-talk while you write. Write out loud. Think out loud as you write to model the connection between the spoken word and the written word. So as you're writing the words, make sure that you're modeling that we start with a capital letter, and I'm going to write this word and then put a space, and then I'm going to write this word and put a space, so that they can see the process of starting from top to bottom, left to right with those concepts of print, but they're also thinking about how to organize their ideas into a story. And that's why the teacher is there to help support them in that. That's why it's called shared writing, because the teachers and the children are sharing in the process of writing. You may also have the opportunity to explore some of the other stages of the writing process with your pre-K children. You could possibly do some revising and even some publishing. So you could revisit previous pieces of writing and add to the story, add more details, maybe add some dialogue to the story, or you could even have children take the opportunity to publish class books. I've seen this a lot in pre-K classrooms where children each are given a page to draw a picture of themselves and write their name, and then the teacher might help them write some things about themselves. Or you could publish a class book of stories that you've written on chart paper. So there's lots of opportunities to take children through the various stages of the writing process. You may also want to keep in mind that it's always a good idea to display completed chart stories. After you've written a story with the children, you definitely want to put their story up on display in the classroom. This will help children see that their words have come to life in writing, and that the story that you have created is part of the classroom, and they can take ownership of that part of the classroom. So here are some tips and tricks and ideas for shared writing during large group literacy. You definitely want to make sure to choose simple writing prompts that children can easily respond to. That's why it's always a good idea to try to incorporate shared experiences that everyone had together. It may be difficult to write about a trip to the beach if not all of your children have ever had a trip to the beach. It may not be relevant to write about a day in the snow when some of your children may never have seen snow. So make sure that you're choosing simple writing prompts that children can connect to and easily respond to. At the beginning of the year, and even throughout, half and further into the year, you may want to use rebus pictures to help you represent concrete thoughts so that children can return to the chart and read it on their own with a pointer, maybe during center time or small groups. You can download or get clip art from your computer before you start writing, or you can take your attempt at drawing some rudimentary pictures. But using Rebus pictures is a good way to help children represent concrete thoughts in words and pictures. And then whenever you're doing shared writing, you always want to finish the lesson by reading the finished piece of writing with a pointer. Go from start to finish to read what you just wrote, what the class just wrote, making sure to read with a pointer and tracking the text. And again, this will help children connect the written words to the spoken words that are in their story or piece of writing. Additional ideas include charts with labels, or have can charts where you might pick an animal or a specific topic and talk about what they are, what they have, and what they can do. Other ideas include reading poetry, even if it's just a short poem that you may have written on a piece of chart paper. This is a great way to incorporate a variety of genre of text. If you don't have age-appropriate poetry, write some on a piece of chart paper. If you don't have age-appropriate nonfiction text, write a few facts on a piece of chart paper and display that for the children and read it to them, or help them, get them to help you write facts that they've learned. There's all kinds of things that you can create if you don't have it there. You can also do things like graphic organizers, and other ideas include instructions, recipes, experiments, correspondence, including letters to the principal, letters to the librarian, or even letters to Santa Claus. These are all great ways to get children writing in the pre-K classroom. The last thing that you could possibly incorporate into your large group literacy time is responding to literature. So we've read the story, and what else can we do with that story? After repeated readings of a familiar text, some really good ideas to get children talking about and thinking about those stories is to do responding to literature activities. That includes retelling the stories using pictures or flannel board pieces. That includes acting out stories with props or puppets. And that also includes creating alternate endings to stories. And this is another way to incorporate writing into your large group literacy time. Whatever you're doing, please make sure that you always plan varied and purposeful activities. You need to plan a variety of activities throughout the week. So make sure that you avoid repetitive lesson planning, where you might do the same thing every Monday and the same thing every Tuesday. Many teachers fall into the habit of using the same lessons, activities, or processes from week to week. I often see common activities planned during large group literacy time that include using or creating name charts, looking at environmental print, upper and lowercase letter matching, reviewing the morning message. And these are all great activities to incorporate, but these should not make up the bulk of your large group literacy instruction. If you're going to plan these activities during large group literacy, that's 100% okay. But make sure that you also include throughout the week shared reading and or shared writing. They need to have all of those experiences weekly. To plan a variety of lessons, you want to make sure that they're always purposeful and meaningful to the children, and that you're doing different things on a daily and weekly basis. Make sure that you focus on skills needed for learning or reading comprehension and the process of writing rather than the mechanics of writing. Make sure that you integrate a variety of content areas by reading and writing about various topics. This is a great time to pull in nonfiction text, as well as science and social studies topics, and even math topics. There's a variety of content areas that can be addressed by shared reading and shared writing activities. And make sure that when you're doing large group literacy, the focus is on group reading and group writing experiences rather than individual reading and individual writing experiences. So last few reminders, large group literacy must include reading and writing weekly. You must have both represented on the template throughout the week, every week. Large group literacy must focus on group reading and writing experiences rather than individual reading and writing experiences. And always remember that large group literacy instruction should be varied from week to week, and it should always be purposeful to help children gain those skills they need to be successful with reading comprehension and writing as they get into the primary and upper elementary grades. Some resources for you I wanted to share. If you have any questions or comments and you would like to reach out, my email address is on the screen. I also have a Google site that I use to house resources for directors and teachers. This website has an abundance of resources for lesson planning and assessment. And so the link to that website will be in the comments section of this video, so you can click there to check it out. I also have a Facebook group that you can search for and request to join. It's called Southwest Georgia Pre-K Teachers, so you can look me up there as well. Again, I want to thank you for joining me for this video today. Thank you for sticking around to help me learn more about large group literacy. If you have more questions, more comments, or need additional resources, remember to reach out to me using the contact information or resources provided. Thank you very much.